And welcome back to the Hot Lap, where we are talking Red Bull's wings being clipped, Red Bull's dominant car being just average. I know what is going on there. And also the tension, or lack of, or let's see, between Sainz and Leclerc at Ferrari. But first, Magic Red Bull could face FIA intervention as dominant run continues. This is planetf1.com by Thomas Mayer. Now, Red Bull's ongoing dominance may result in Formula One's governing body making moves to curtail them, the article says. As we know, we got 12 wins from 12 races and a points tally that's pretty much double anyone else, as Red Bull have pretty much been the dominant force of this year. They have been untouchable. And having won both titles last year, they're set to pretty much win, barring a miracle, both titles this year. Having said that, it said despite the sliding scale of that wind tunnel deficit, Red Bull are still really dominant, and it seems to continue, and it says it shows no sign of abating. Now, we've got 10 races left. Red Bull are eyeing up the record that stood for 35 years when McLaren won every race bar one. And as it stands, it's very unlikely that, barring reliability, that it's not going to happen. Will we get like a Brazilian Grand Prix towards the end of the year where George Russell won? Potentially. But unlike, for example, in the 88, even if you go back as far, as recently-ish as 2012, where you still had, Hamilton retired from the league twice, I think, in 2012, Abu Dhabi and Singapore, I believe. I could be wrong. But now, if you look at the turbo hybrid era, especially now, all the cars are very, very reliable, aren't they? Especially with the view of they can take a penalty if they think something's happening when they change their car or go over their engine allocation, but they're still reliable. They're still going to finish the races. And that Red Bull can pretty much, as we've seen with Max, start anywhere and win. But by such dominance, it may lead to the FIA intervening in a bid to curtail Red Bull's dominance. That's from 3 times Le Mans class winner David Kennedy. He's the former shadow F1 racer, and he spoke to planetf1.com. He said history has proven the FIA have done that. He said they've done it before, and they've done it ostensibly when Michael Schumacher was dominating. He said the FIA came up with a whole variety of changes, particularly in qualifying, what you could use in qualifying, what you could use, apologies for the phone, what you could use in the race. And they did everything to try and balance the books and stop his runaway dominance. It has a detrimental effect on the sport, absolutely. Now, those that follow the sport long enough will remember the days when McLaren ran away with everything, and it just takes the interest away. However, the caveat being McLaren had Alain Prost and Senna to make it exciting. I guess Mercedes had Rosberg and Hamilton, as we mentioned, to make it a bit more exciting. Red Bull have Max Verstappen, at the moment, against his race engineer, funnily enough, as the most entertaining thing up front. But Kennedy goes on to say that it's tough for anyone to knock Red Bull-McLaren combo. He says, I don't think there's any reason why they wouldn't look at trying to balance the books in some way. But the other interesting thing is that over the recent years, you've seen development happen at such a pace that what struck me as quite amazing is that the other teams actually haven't moved at the same level as close to where Red Bull are at the moment. He said, but they have the magic dust at the moment in terms of engineering, the performance of the car, the performance of the engine, and of course, Max is at the top of his game. So it's going to be pretty tough for anyone to knock that combination off. But can Red Bull actually pull off that impossible and win every race this season? It certainly looks like that, Kennedy said. When the car wasn't the best, and I say that in Monaco, it was Max that just could dig deeper to walk on water. You can get away with that for so long, so it's difficult to see anybody being able to push them off the pedestal. Now, as we know, if we go back as recently from 2020, that dominant Mercedes, to the 2021, where the FIA changed the rules, some would argue purposely so, to slow Mercedes down, and the rules hurt the low-rate cars, such as Mercedes, such as at the time, I think, Racing Point, called Tracing Point in 2020, as some kind of meme hashtag, and it really hurt them, and we had that amazing 2021 championship, didn't we? So fingers crossed for something like that we can see. But the next story on motorsport.com, the Red Bull is just an average car. It's just average good. So Red Bull's, this is by Jonathan Noble, Red Bull's RB19 is already a record breaker, as we know, and looks set to be in the history books. And it says, in fact, Verstappen and Perez aren't derailed by a dose of bad luck. Over the second course of the season, it could become the first challenger with a clean sweep. But while the RB19 is leaving others in its wake, Red Bull's own perception of the car is markedly different. He goes on to say, for it does not see the RB19 as being a particularly standout contender that has delivered anything super spectacular. It's simply a car that is decent in all areas. Now, as Red Bull's technical director, Pierre Wash, tells motorsport.com, it is average good for everything, which is creating a good car. It's not very good in one aspect. Why we think it is good, because we are quicker than others, but fundamentally, I would say, we didn't do a fantastic job. We did a good job. I was more surprised by the others who didn't do as good a job, I would say. That is why our expectations were different from the beginning of the year. I don't want to be modest or whatever, but when you see some teams are able in 3 races to gain 1 second per lap, it means if you put the stuff together, it will be decent. It doesn't require 2 years of development. And as we know, Red Bull finished their last year's campaign in very strong form, winning 10 of the last 11 races. It's believed a combination of a change in floor regulations, with Mercedes getting its act together on the zero pod concept and Ferrari switching early focus to 23, would leave it facing a 3-way fight. However, that's very much not the case. And Wash said, we didn't anticipate that. We anticipated that we might be in the midst of the fight for the win with 2 teams, Mercedes and Ferrari. We thought our advantage at the end of last year was not strong enough, and the change of the regulation of the floor, rising the floor edge and the kick line would bring back those teams. Then the loss of performance we thought we had during the winter, especially after October, with the reduction of wind tunnel time we had, it'd be tricky to achieve that success. So yeah, it was a surprise at the beginning of the season. I mean, the article goes on, but I'll leave it up to you to decide whether they're arrogant enough to say, we built an average car. I mean, they didn't. It is the best car. It is the best car. So by default, it's not an average car. They're just saying that to scare all the others. Next year, they're going to be really super strong. Bear in mind what we talked about in the first news article about the Red Bull having their wings clipped. Too many stories like that surely are going to give the FIA, at least their eyebrows, going to be raised. And the FIA, I imagine, are going to be like, well, wait a minute. We need to do something. The big telling of whether we need to do something is going to be in F1 numbers, isn't it? We had a story a while back, is Red Bull's dominance hurting F1? In terms of the numbers, that's then going to hurt the revenue, because not as many eyes are going to be in Formula 1, especially in this digital world where you've got your Netflix, you've got your Disney Pluses, you've got other sport as well, you've got free sport. Remember, a lot of people pay for either the F1 app or Sky or for F1 content. Very little F1 is free live now. So they're contending against that, and you've got obviously the touring car on ITV. You've got like British GT, the GT, the Fantech GT, Europe series as well going on, and that's free, available over YouTube, and that does happen sometimes on the Grand Prix weekends. So it's going to be interesting. To see the numbers come the end of the year, because this will be now the second year, at least the last 18 months anyway, let's say, after the mid-season last year when Ferrari had that Austria win, and that was about it, and we had that moment in Brazil with George Russell winning, but other than that, it's been very average, hasn't it? So we will see here as to whether the TV viewing figures are going to be harmed, and if it is, expect the FIA to act. Now, the next up is Leclerc is saying Sainz F1 tension is blown out of proportion. So Leclerc says suggestions of simmering tension between him and Ferrari F1 teammate Carlos Sainz has been blown out of proportion. The pair don't always see eye to eye this season. There have been a number of times when radio messages have highlighted disagreements. Now, in Australia, Leclerc was unhappy that he did not get the tow that he had been expecting from Sainz in qualifying, and Austrian Grand Prix, Sainz came on the radio early to ask Ferrari to move Leclerc aside, but the request was denied. And then at the British Grand Prix, both drivers made pointed remarks about each other in qualifying after a tussle for track position, with Leclerc saying, Nice, Carlos. Nice, good overtake in the last corner. Sainz passed him on track at Silverstone, despite the monogas driver having priority in the session. Sainz then said, it's a bit unfair what you're asking me to do there, sacrificing my tyre temperature, but anyway, whatever. Also, I am P4, he is P3. I am more at risk. Now, these moments have fueled theories that Leclerc and Sainz have a much more intense rivalry than the team admits. But the article from Autosport.com goes on to say Leclerc has rubbished that suggestion, as he says that people are misunderstanding the situation if they think there is internal trouble at Ferrari. I'm quite active on social media, so I see that I see what's been said all about Leclerc said in an interview on Autosport. It's blown out of proportion. I think, Carlos, we have a great relationship. I mean, outside the car, we know how to work together and we get on really well together because we share lots of interest. He says, at the same time, there's a lot of competitiveness in between us two, but we are in Formula One and I love the sport because there's competitiveness. I think it's great to have that. Leclerc thinks that people read too much into these radio messages as they're often made in the heat of competition, you know, when you've got adrenaline going and everything. It's going to be interesting what happens at Ferrari. I mean, what's going to happen with Carlos Sainz? Are Ferrari going to keep him? Out the two. Obviously, there's rumours that Leclerc is going to sign a fairly hefty extension. Ferrari really want to keep him. He's seen as a golden boy there, especially with Fred Vasseur. And it's also been reported that Lewis Hamilton said no to a Ferrari contract. So, and that would I imagine that would have been replacing Carlos Sainz. So, Sainz is the man under pressure there, really, at Ferrari, which could be a bit tension because Sainz knows that he needs to at least match Leclerc, if not beat him, to keep that seat. And I think it's fair to say that Sainz's seat is a lot less safe than Leclerc's. So it's going to be interesting for the next 10 races what happens between the Ferrari pair. But there you go. That is your news. This has been the Hot Lap. We will speak to you and I'll see you next time.